1060. Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now.
Welcome to Burnt Out. The Burnt Out podcast shares the stories of firefighters, emergency personnel, and other first responders around the world to create a pathway to save lives. The stories you will hear are real and may be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. And now I'd like to introduce you to your host for Burnt Out, a 33-year retired veteran of the fire department, Skip O.
Thanks, Sean, for that cool introduction. We also would like to thank our sponsors, Turning Point Madison County, Command Post Wellness, and also Bridges of Hope, the Warriors Program. If you want to know more about our sponsors, go on burnoutpodcast.org and you can click on their logo, and that can tell you a little bit more about what they do for first responders. But I'd like to welcome a few people. First of all, I'd like to welcome just the old guy, Jeff. Thank you for coming on here being our co-host.
You're welcome, Skip. Thanks for inviting me. I definitely appreciate it.
Well, everybody, me and Jeff are here to interview an author. His name is Derek Robinson. He has wrote the book Continued. And I think that started off from a Facebook post a long time ago. We was introduced from Derek from Jason Saltel. Jason's also an author. He wrote the book The Rescuer, but he said, Skip, this is a good guy. You need to get him on the show to interview him, because he is right with our mission point here at Burnout, what we want to do. Derek, we really appreciate you to the show. How you doing today?
Jeff and Skip, like I always like to say, I'm just happy to be here. And if you read the book, you know what that means. I appreciate this opportunity to meet with you guys and chat about all things about the book, PTSD, the fire service, whatever we can do to help a brother or sister first responder out.
Hey, Derek, could you give people a little bit of flashpoint about your life, your background of the fire department, your family life, and things like that? You mind doing that for us?
Yeah, not at all. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, because sometimes my brothers and sisters and I joke about needing a whiteboard to explain it all. I grew up a middle child, but I'm also one of 8. So the way it worked was I grew up with my oldest brother and my next youngest sister in a family unit, and so I was the middle child. My father had been married and divorced several times, kept procreating, and so I have 4 brothers and 3 sisters, but I only grew up in a family unit of 3 with a single mom who worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table for all of us. And so, I growing up, I think that middle child and not having a father who was kind of actively involved led me to wanting to become something more and help others. I think I found inspiration in the fact that my dad was an Inglewood police officer, and then ended up finding my way into the lifeguard service in LA County on the beaches there. And as I was pursuing full-time employment there, I realized that a lot of the guys that I worked with during the summers were also firefighters, and they all just seemed happy and loved their job. And I thought, what's this thing about? I got to check this out. So I started taking tests and applying, and I got hired in Kern County, California, and I lived the double life for several years, still living in LA, lifeguarding on my days off, and working at the fire department, and just having a blast, living kind of what we jokingly called the hero life. I just have a strong family unit, and after learning to share my story and share it publicly, my family became very aware of my struggle that started in my youth, and very much supported me 100% and have been there for me every step of the way since the book came out, and are always checking on me and make sure I'm okay, and just always at just a phone call away or a text away. So it's been a huge growth, just not just for me, but for my family as well.
Going back, what year did you start your career in the fire service?
So I started in 2001, and I was still on probation when 9/11 happened, and I will never forget that day and the sights and sounds of sitting there. Everything was put off. We work 48 hours here in Kern County, and we sat there for 48 hours and stared at the TV and absorbed everything. Like everything, as a probationary firefighter, was put on hold and put on the back burner, and we didn't worry about anything that shift, and we just kind of sat there in awe and watched it all.
I remember where I was at 9/11 in the living room watching on my TV. I just got off job. Jeff, do you remember where you was when all that started?
Absolutely. I remember that Tuesday very well, yes. I was situated just south of D.C., I guess at that time about 15 nautical miles, so we were heightened alert all the way around there. The DMV was a mess. It was a mess because the Pentagon's right down there and stuff, too. It was horrible.
One thing what we do on our intro, we got the calls from 9/11 coming in, and that's not to promote us. That's just to remember. Everybody has, and I'm not trying to compare anybody's life with what happened that day, but everybody has kind of like a 9/11 in their life. Everything falls down, falls apart, in chaos and stuff. And Derek, getting on in 2001 and leading up, what kind of things that led you to that moment where you realize you need help? I know there's a big gap there you need to fill in, but could you kind of take us through that about having your dreams, first year being a firefighter, you're going to be a rescue. Could you go through that a little bit for us?
Gosh, that's really complicated. So I lived the dream of a firefighter. I never grew up dreaming of becoming a firefighter, but once I found myself in the fire service, it was a dream. I remember every morning smiling on my way to work, just couldn't wait to, go help and the things we got to do. It was just a pure joy. And over time, and it wasn't recognizable to me, it started to become more of a burden. I can remember before I realized I got help, just getting so frustrated when we got a call and just not wanting to go and just feeling like I was interrupted, even though I might have been working on something personal at the station as opposed to, training or drilling at the station. And I just remember having this very negative adverse reaction, and looking back, that wasn't what I loved about the job when I first signed up. And I slowly kind of fell deeper and deeper into this darkness. And, I'd become aware of, the Stamp Out the Stigma campaign from the IFF and CPF because I was a union president for 14 years and really bought in. And I think a lot of that stemmed from my inner psyche telling me like, hey, dummy, wake up, it's you. So I really became an advocate because I didn't want to take that call that one of my members had chosen suicide as their best option. So fast forward, and I'm in the middle of it, and I don't even recognize it. I mean, I swam in college, and I continue to swim every day, just about today. And I not to brag, but for example, I still hold a record for a 2-mile open water swim. And there were days in the pool that I couldn't even swim 25 yards without feeling like I needed to scramble out of the pool and catch my breath. Looking back now, fully realizing that was anxiety related to PTSD, but in the middle of it, I didn't even recognize it. And that's the scary part is, even in the middle of it, it's so subtle, you just never realize it. And so that's what makes it so hard for others to realize it and see it in someone else's life. It's those subtle changes that we don't see every day. So fast forward, I was in the middle of my darkness. I couldn't sleep. I was drinking the bomber bottles, so 22-ounce bottles of a local brewery, 9.6 or 7%. I was drinking 4 to 6 of those a night just to get to sleep. Now, if you think about it, each one of those bottles is about a 6-pack of Bud Light when you talk about alcohol content. That's what I was doing every night just to get to sleep. And I would get to sleep, and then inevitably I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I would have this voice in my head questioning my worth in life and questioning what I'm doing here and is it worth going on and should we continue. And so it manifested into the suicidal ideations that still didn't wake me up, still didn't clue me into what was actually going on. And finally one day we were we went to a conference for the fire department, or I'm sorry, the union. And my friend at the time kind of knew something was wrong because I just wasn't there. And they were all getting ready to go hit the tables and everything. I had no desire. It's like, I just want to go back to my room. He kind of pulled me aside. And that's when I finally just kind of opened up to someone and said, man, I just don't even know if this life is worth living anymore. Scared the crap out of him. He didn't have any training. So his response was, well, think about your son. And I'd already been convinced in my own broken mind that my son would be better off without me because I was a burden, right? So I went to my room. I turned my phone off every night. I don't turn it off. I put it on Do Not Disturb. And so he was trying to call and text me. I wouldn't answer the phone because I was asleep. I wasn't ready to do something. I hadn't made a plan yet. But it was serious enough that he saw the look in my face and he realized that I was, heading down a very dark path. And that's the first time I'd ever shared that with anyone. So next thing I know, someone's pounding on my door in the middle of the night. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I go to the door and it's my friend and he's checking in on me. I didn't even think about it at the time. I'm like, dude, I'm fine. I'm just sleeping. I told you I'd be fine. I'll see you in the morning, type of thing. Well, come to find out later that, and it didn't dawn on me, like I never told him what room I was in, but there he was pounding on my door. Well, he had gone to security because he was so worried about me that they had security standing down the hallway to let him in case I didn't answer the door. And that's what kind of shook me and woke me up to the fact that like I just scared one of my good friends to the point that, he went to security and brought security to my door because he was afraid that I was going to make that irrevocable decision. And so the next day was when I kind of just got hit by, just needed to reach out for help. And I realized that, I'd been kind of hiding for a long time behind this mask. And it was just time to rip off the mask and ask for help.
So Derek, at that time when you asked for help from 2001 until then, what year was it then?
So I think I finally reached out for help in 2017. And really it kind of manifests itself in that moment. I went and tried to find help. And you know what? The first day I went in and saw a counselor, it was like a night and day difference. I walked out of there just feeling so much lighter, so much off my shoulders. And I knew I was on the right path. I knew I was on the way to getting healthy again. And I knew that that God had placed me with the right person at that point. And so after that, I became I decided I wanted to speak out because we talk about the Stamp Out the Stigma campaign and we encourage people to get help. But to my knowledge, at that point, there still wasn't anyone who had gotten help, gotten back to a healthy, normal life, still enjoying their career. And so I decided to, I'd been journaling at the recommendation of my clinician. So I composed a post for Facebook to try and share like, hey, it's okay. You can not only do you need to get help and ask for help, but you can get back to living normal, healthy life. And so I was really struck because I believe in June of 2017, there were 3 firefighters in Southern California that had chosen suicide as their best option. And it just really kind of hit me hard because I'm like, here I am. I was there, almost there, and I got help and I'm better. Someone needs to kind of come out of the shadows and share that it's okay to ask for help. And not only is it okay to ask for help, you can get better. You can live a full life the way we're designed to live going forward. And so I shared that post, scared to death, sick to my stomach, just waiting for all the negative comments and backlash and all that. So in the morning, I was on a baseball trip with my brother, and he had helped me edit it. And so in the morning, he's like, "Well, how is it?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm too scared to look." So he pulls up his Facebook, looks at my post, and he's like, "Dude, it's all positive. You got hundreds of likes, hundreds of comments, and it's all positive and all this stuff." And so I felt good at that point. And then one of my good friends had suggested I write a book. I'm like, "Oh no, I'll never write a book. That's beyond me." I was in third grade and still didn't even know how to read. So the thought of ever writing a book was so preposterous to me that I didn't even consider it. And then, I just kept with my clinician working through some of the calls that had haunted me and left me with the scars. And I kept journaling those. And one day, it just I had two of those old school composition books filled with stories. And I thought, you know what? I think there might be enough here for a book. And so I worked towards composing the book. And so now it's I laugh now because I remember when I first started with my clinician, she encouraged me to share my story. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to be the poster boy for this, right? And now I've written a book and I've exposed myself to the whole world type of thing. But I don't regret any part of it, because I know I've heard people come to me, or I've had people reach out to me and say that, the book made a difference for them or their family member. And so I know that the impact was worth spending the time writing the book.
So Derek, let me, this is Jeff. I want to pop back a little bit. First of all, thank you for sharing the story with us. I really appreciate it myself. And I know what it's like what you've gone through too. And it's just, well, Skip, what made you decide to open up, tell your story? That's got to be nerve shattering.
So the hardest part was the Facebook post. Honestly, I had kind of composed it. My brother had edited. We felt like it was good enough. It was ready, and I was still just scared to death. I was so afraid that the reaction was going to be negative, and that the guys at work were going to have a negative reaction to it. And it was just sick to my stomach. I couldn't get myself to the idea of actually posting it. And then finally, right before I went to bed, I had it all up on my Facebook. I just hadn't hit the post button yet. And I just remember going, you know what? Screw it. I'm going for it. And I hit that post button and I shut my computer down. I remember it took me a while to go to sleep that night, because this pit in my stomach was just eating at me, just expecting just all kinds of negativity and judgment and everything. And that didn't happen. And then it's funny because people talk about, wow, the book, that must have been really hard. And I go, you know what? After the Facebook post, the book was easy. I didn't feel like there was anything more in the book that wasn't in the original Facebook post that would lead to any kind of negativity. And really, I really tried to strip down the book and the story and be as honest and raw as possible, because no matter what, there's someone else who's going through the same exact thing, and they need to know that others have suffered the same way. And I really just want to advocate for reaching out for help, because you can get better. You can get back to a normal, healthy life. I spoke recently for the first time at the encouragement of our friend Jason Sautel, and in my preparation, I was able to tell the crowd, I go, you know what? The 5 best years of my life have been the 5 since I asked for help.
That's great. One thing I wanted to ask you too. I'm looking at your book, and I'm holding up the book. Nobody can see that. I'm holding up the book. The title, Continue. Where did that title come from?
So I'd become familiar with the use of the semicolon for people who had considered or survived suicide. So I kind of took that on. I wanted to make it something different or bigger, because I actually tattooed it on my body, but I didn't want just the semicolon. I wanted something more. So I kind of came up with continue, because the semicolon means that you could end the sentence, but you continue on. So I decided to embrace the idea of continue. Like, I chose to continue living, as opposed to ending it all and escaping the pain.
Well, I like when I'm looking at the book's cover, I'm going to describe it to everybody that can't listen and can't see it. Sorry. It says continue. It's a person that's walking in the woods, and it's kind of a grayish, kind of a fall look. And it says continue, surviving the darkness, choosing to live. Derek Robinson, edited by Joshua Robinson.
Yeah, it's my brother.
Okay, cool. The thing is, when I first met Derek, and I thought I seen this cover, and I text Derek 2 years ago. My granddaughter paints a little bit. She just started painting, and I told her, hey, could you paint me a picture of somebody that has no substance that's lost in the woods? And I asked her to do that. I looked at this thing and I went in there and looked at my wall, and it's amazing the theme. Not that it looked exactly like it, but the theme about that. And that kind of that's a confirmation that we're supposed to be doing this right now, right moment. For some reason, I know what the reason is for me personally, but for some reason we're supposed to be talking about this right now. So nobody has to walk in that darkness or get lost in that woods and up in their mind. But Derek, I went through your book and I spotlighted a few things. Not only I could relate with your father, your father being a law enforcement, my two brothers. I can relate. We both, and Jeff, this is something you might find funny since he loves Elvis. He likes Elvis the Hound Dog. Elton John. I looked in how you're very candid with your language. You're very real, and I think firefighters, police officers, military. We got the language we all talk to each other, we understand. And I like it because you're very real in your book about that, and that really helps. When you sat down and wrote this book, what was I know what your motivation was while you're writing it, but when you decided to make it real and putting some of these more sensitive things in there, where was your motivation with that? How'd that help you get through that?
So the simplest way to say it is I wanted to be as candid and real as possible. Maybe I was dealing with a little bit of imposter syndrome because I felt like, I was getting to a point where I was so healthy that I felt like maybe it wasn't real and it was imagined. So for me to be as real and open and raw as possible, it was kind of like, if I can do it, you can do it too. You don't have to do it as publicly as I did, but by being honest and real and open, no one can ever come back at me and say, well, that wasn't true or that's not honest. I really was compelled to be as forthright as possible and as vulnerable as possible, because whether I shy away from that stuff or I don't, just being candid in that way is going to help someone else find their strength to ask for help and go share those stories with someone else. And someone's going to relate to different pieces in that book. And it's interesting to me because, the feedback I get from different people, whether they're friends or family or people I don't even know, the things they take from the book are always surprising to me, because I go, really? Because I don't even remember writing that way or intentionally putting something in there that way. But what people grab from it is always surprising to me, which tells me that it's relatable. And I really tried to, in a lot of ways, infuse some pop culture. I didn't want to bog it down with a bunch of fire talk and jargon that the average reader wasn't going to understand. I wanted it to be relatable to not just the first responder, but the person in the first responder's life or their world, so that they could understand what we're going through, but also try to have some kind of points of interest or something to kind of keep them engaged, as opposed to just losing them with talking about a GCS or vitals or any of those kind of minute details. So I really tried to keep it more generic for the average reader to be able to enjoy and get through and find a way to spot these things and hopefully help themselves or the first responder in their life.
Sure. Hey, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
When you hear him talking about his book, how he wrote it, stuff, being like, being real, and what in your life, can you relate to some of the stuff when he's talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. At the beginning, the part where you don't know what the hell's going on, but you know something wrong. That, unfortunately, that's all too familiar. And that I think I was going to ask that question about it. When did you make that decision? What was there a breaking point where you absolutely had no choice in your mind but to seek help, or the least traveled route, I guess, for lack of better terms?
Yeah, no, looking back, I mean, there were so many clear signs to me that I didn't recognize. And even though I'd sat in all the trainings and the awareness and all that stuff, I still didn't even recognize it in myself. And it wasn't really until I saw that look in Vegas on my friend's face and just the complete disbelief and kind of distraught look on his face to understand and realize that I was as broken and as hurt as I was, even though I'd put on this brave face for so long. It got to me. It struck a chord with me. And, that next day I was sitting in a class and it wouldn't go away. That look on his face wouldn't go away, even though we'd had breakfast that morning and all that look from the night before just didn't go away. And I've got to get help. I've got to find a way to get help. I need to just make the call and figure this out, because that look on his face was kind of broke that talk in my head, that dark mistress that I'd been dancing with every night of what is my self-worth and all that stuff. And it really shook me to the point that I finally kind of maybe had a breakthrough in understanding that I wasn't necessarily a burden to everyone in my life. I would create the burden by choosing suicide. And so I really kind of found that inspiration to finally just ask for help.
Now, Derek, I got to ask, roll back a little bit. When you said you didn't recognize, but you're in the class and stuff like that, do you think a lot of that was deniability, that this is not going to happen to me? I'm this guy. I'm the mofo here. This can't happen to me.
Absolutely. I was the union president for 14 years. I did a lot of great work. I was invincible. I was like every teenager out there or brand new firefighter. I was untouchable, invincible. Can't happen to me. It's got to be something else type of thing. And so it was always about finding excuses. And even when I was, the sleepless nights piled up and piled up and piled up and only made it worse. And here's the thing I'll tell you. During all that, I never stopped praying. I prayed every night. But what I was praying for, I was asking God, just let me sleep one night. Let me feel what that's like again, because I hadn't slept in months. And I just remember praying, and I was faithful in my prayer every night. As bad as I was hurting, my faith never wavered. And I prayed every night. I said, God, please just let me sleep one night. That's all I wanted. I just wanted the opportunity to get a good night's rest for once.
Some peace.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I tell you, that's, I think Jeff can relate with me. When I'm hearing Derek tell his story, I'm nodding my head, yes, or thinking, man, that we got the same emotions. And this is three of us so-called old guys.
Yeah, that's me.
That's right. And, I could relate. I was looking so many parts in your book, Suck It Up, Buttercup, that stare. I remember the stare. I got to watch it because I can still do that now. Just sit on my couch. I'm worn out. I'm tired. I talk to a lot of people about suicide prevention, about mental health. Me and Jeff had this we'll talk and help everybody else. And all of a sudden, my cup is empty. I'm sitting here letting that dark stuff come in again. I go, hold on a minute. This is old behavior. And I got to watch myself. Derek, and I'm going to ask you too, Jeff. Derek, even today, can you relate to any of that I just said?
Absolutely, 100%. You have to be mindful of it all. I am grateful for my recovery. I'm grateful for my post-traumatic growth. But what it also did for me was it led to me retiring early, and I have no qualms about that. I think it was the best decision I ever made. But as reinvigorated as I was still running calls with guys that I could see suffering the same stuff that I was suffering, but they weren't aware yet, and trying to guide them to help. They weren't interested. They didn't want to admit that there was something wrong. And so it it kind of took the luster back out of the job, and being exposed to those guys. You hear them all. I'm sure you guys are all familiar. You get a difficulty breathing call, and everyone gets in the engine and they're just like, oh, difficulty living type of thing. Just the negativity and morale is so low that you're susceptible to it. And I was mindful of it because of what I'd gone through. And that's when I really knew that I needed to retire from the fire service and transition into something else. And so it was really a decision about protecting my mental health going forward, because as dark as it was, and the simple thought, the simple fact that at one point in my life, I was absolutely convinced that my own son would be better off without me. And that's coming from a son of a dad who was never there. And my mind was so broken that I was ready to, in my mind, absolve him of the burden of me being his father. And so I knew I didn't want to go back there. I knew I wanted to be his dad going forward. And so I really I put myself out on the job market. I spent a year trying to retrain myself, refigure out where I was going to go, how I was going to transition into something else. But I knew I wanted to leave the fire service because I didn't want to risk my physical and mental health any longer. I'd given more than enough, and I almost gave it all up, and so I didn't want to go back there.
Well, I'm glad you recognize that and you're taking care of yourself. Jeff, same question. Do you find yourself sometimes giving way too much and you don't leave anything for yourself? Can you relate to what Derek just said?
Oh, yeah. That's pretty much got where I'm at. It's the same thing, we take care of everybody. That's what we do. And being in leadership and stuff too, we take care of our boys and girls. We'll be fine. That's what we're geared for. That's what we've been built for. That's what we're here for. We'll take care of everybody's problem. You'll be just fine until that day. We realize that somebody kind of misled you there.
We're all trained, like you said earlier, suck it up, buttercup, and this is what we do. We run these calls, and you're taught to compress it all. But think about the recent episode with Damar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills and the negative reaction of the public in general when they saw what happened, and the fact that they were doing CPR on this professional athlete, in front of 60, 70,000 people, and the public reaction to it all was so, they were just so pulled back from it type of thing. Like, wow, that's crazy. And then you think about it, it's like, that's what we do every day on the job, and now we're expected to have a normal response to that. No, we're not developed that way. We're not supposed to be that way. It's okay to have that reaction to it. It's okay to not be okay with what you just saw or did or who you responded to type of thing.
Before we run short on time, there's one thing that your book toward the end, and I think it's very important, not just for what happened in your state and how you push legislation to help with a bill there, how it'll help other states to mirror what you guys are doing in California. Could you talk about that bill just real quick and what it does for first responders?
Yeah, so that's SB or Senate Bill 542. After I was so public about my story on Facebook, I was an advocate. I've become an advocate. I'm still an advocate for behavioral health issues and training the next generation of first responders. But in that, our state organization had called on me to help with bills that they were working on at the state level to make behavioral health issues, or PTSD or PTSI, a part of our workers' comp program or workers' comp system. So it becomes a presumptive. And really, it just protects the first responders out there who we know are going to deal with this and have issues with it. And it protects them, and it gives them the rights to the medical care or the treatment that they deserve because they've been exposed to this unforgiving profession that people just don't realize what we see and do on a regular basis. So I was brought up to Sacramento on a couple occasions to speak in both an assembly committee and a Senate committee and share my story and testify to what this looks like and what this does to us. And so on that, the legislation was passed, and workers' comp now covers PTSD in the state of California because of that. And I got to go up to Sacramento one more time after that and be there when the governor signed that legislation into law. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to make a significant impact on the lives of first responders, whether they know it or not. It's just all part of the mission of trying to help one more person, however that happens. And hopefully that happens with this podcast. Hopefully someone is able to connect and make the right choices going forward, and not fall into the traps of the darkness and make that irrevocable decision of suicide.
Well, I tell you, I know I appreciate your advocacy and your heart, what you're doing. There's a couple questions that I'd like to ask you, and that I ask everybody. The first, not a question, I guess it's there's somebody listening right now, a first responder, whether it's military, firefighter, paramedic, they got that stare. They're listening to this podcast, just looking out the window, not sure which way to go, whether it's suicide, whether it's their job, marriage. What are you going to tell them? You got 30 seconds to a minute to tell them something to get.
Yeah, you know what? I understand where they are, but I can tell you for sure, absolutely, that if you reach out for help, that it works. You can get back to a normal, healthy life. My other thing that I always tell people is, if the first thing doesn't work, if the first clinician doesn't work or the first treatment program doesn't work, find the next one. It's like dating. You don't marry the first girl you date. Just like when it comes to your health, keep fighting for yourself. If you don't connect with your clinician, find the next person, because it's not just because I recommend someone or either you guys recommend someone. If you don't connect with that person, you're not going to be successful in your recovery. So find the right person. Don't give up on yourself. Keep fighting for yourself like you would anyone else. And that includes finding the right treatment plan, the right clinician, whatever it is, because there's no absolute in any of this. It's not, it's not the type of therapy. It's not EMDR or any of that kind of stuff. All those things can help. You just have to find the right path for yourself, but fight for yourself. And don't settle with the first person if you're not connecting. You have to have that connection. You have to have that trust to be able to open up and share your story.
That's good. Another thing I do, and I told Jeff this and everybody, I said, what's a statement or a quote that rings to your mind when you're struggling or you got to push yourself? Is there a quote that kind of comes to you every once in a while?
Yeah, so this one's going to probably open me up for some mocking, but and I will tell you that I've never seen the movie, but because of my lifetime of swimming competitively and all that, I always go back to just keep swimming. And for me, that's, like I said earlier, there's some days I couldn't even swim 25 yards. And so if there's a day in the pool where I'm struggling or I maybe feel that anxiety come back, I just keep telling myself, just keep swimming, just one more lap, just do one more, just do one more, just do one more. So for me, it's just keep swimming. And, it's kind of fits my life more than anything. So.
Well, that's good. I like that. Sometimes you got to keep it simple and what pertains to you and keeps you moving. Jeff, do you got any closing things for Derek before we have him? We talk about his book and where he can get his book.
Do you have a public Facebook page that you care to share?
I do. So if you get the book, on the back, we have it all listed. I've got a Facebook and Instagram. So both of them can be found at Continue by Derek Robinson. That's DREK. And then Robinson, normal spelling. So Continue by Derek Robinson on Facebook and Instagram.
Sure. And if everybody goes to the burnoutpodcast.org site, we'll have his links, what Derek wants to share on there will be there, how you can get his book, contacts, email, or whatever Derek wants to share with us. So you can go there to burnoutpodcast.org and get that information there.
Derek, you could write another book?
I've learned not to say absolutely not, because I never thought I'd write that original Facebook post. And then when I was encouraged to write a book, I said, absolutely not. So it's not on the radar is what I will tell you, but I'm enjoying my journey now. And if something strikes me, I can see it happening again. But I've learned not to say absolutely not, because I've said it a couple times and I've proven myself wrong. Or I've proven myself a liar, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah. He's got his plane in the hangar.
Yeah.
It's not quite on the radar. Yes, in the hangar.
Yeah.
I get you.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'd like to, Derek Robinson, the book Continued. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your heart with us, and not only share your brokenness, but also your successes and your faith. And we really appreciate you coming on here. Like I said, go to burnoutpodcast.org. You can get information how to get Derek's book, and also how to get a Facebook page. And there's also our guest host, Just Jeff. Jeff, how can they see you on TikTok? Let them know.
Yeah, call me Jeff, Just Jeff, my TikTok name.
You can go on our website and we'll connect you to Just Jeff. He's got some good videos too. But I'd like to thank everybody for listening in to the show. And remember, when you go home tonight, shut your phone off and your radio off and get some sleep. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Burnout. Burnout is brought to you by the Worldwide Peer Support. You can visit Burnout Podcast at burntoutpodcast.org or visit Worldwide Peer Support at worldwidepeersupport.org. Your host for Burnt Out is Skip O. Executive producer Sean P. Neal. And produced by mypodcastmedia.